My name is Steve Grubbs. I am the CEO of Victory XR, and we were founded in 2016, and our goal has always been to deliver learning and training through 3D spatial technologies, and that might mean deploying it through virtual reality. It might mean deploying it as a 3D spatial experience through a Chromebook or a PC. But what we believe fundamentally is that immersive technologies, the ability to give people the option of jumping into a true simulation where you are immersed in that simulation, that there's really no better way to learn. Of course, the best way to do that is with a virtual reality headset, but we also understand that that's not always an option and that it's still being adopted. So if you think about the adoption of PCs or smartphones, it takes a while. And so that's where we are with virtual reality headsets. We made the decision this year to also begin deploying 3D experiences through Chrome browsers. And starting last year, we began integrating AI teachers, tutors, TAs, and simulation subjects into our experiences, both in virtual reality and in our Chrome browser product. So this makes a huge difference. And we're going to talk a little less today about AI and more about immersive VR, but I just want to cover AI for 60 seconds here. If you think about a simulation, and for example, we work with our friends at Seton Hall on a counseling and therapy AI simulation. And previously, as I understand it, students would play the patient in a counseling and therapy, and another student would play the doctor or the professional. But now the department, led by a guest that we'll be talking with today, has integrated into this an AI patient that you can have a two-way conversation with. And so it's a pretty powerful tool. You can build a backstory for that patient. And if you ask the exact same question on different days, you'll get a slightly different answer because the AI is like a human. If you ask me the exact same question 3 days in a row, I'm going to give you a very similar answer, but it will be slightly different. And it's the same way with AI simulations and AI patients. So it's a pretty cool product. Now, today we're going to be talking about mass casualty and mass triage. So that's a pretty heavy topic, but it's an important topic because we all know whether it's in a war zone or whether it is on a crime scene or maybe a mass shooting. And no one ever knows where these are going to occur. They're just as likely to occur in a small town as they are a big city. We saw Uvalde and others. And so when that occurs, how are local emergency management crews trained? And that's what Seton Hall has put together with the team at Victory XR. And by creating this simulation, it allows for professionals to actually experience the emergency situation and the urgency that comes with injured individuals. And so what I want to do now is just to show you a video that actually shows you the product. And then we're going to talk with Leslie Rippon. So let me share this video right now. All right. Cassie, let me know if I'm doing anything wrong, but I think I'm sharing it properly.
Looks good from my end.
Okay, here we go.
It hurts so bad. Is that my leg bone? Robert Simpson. Okay, I'll take some if you think it will help.
I feel fine, but something hit me in the head in there.
I think I'm okay, but my arm is bleeding.
I think I'm okay. I wasn't near the crash when it happened.
I'm having trouble breathing. I can't seem to take a deep breath.
I didn't eat today and think I just need some juice. Thank you. This should help me.
All right, so I think you have a sense of I mean it's a pretty heavy subject, but the reality is that we're fortunate when people are well trained with this. So Leslie, can you turn on your camera? And I'd like to introduce you and ask you a few questions and talk about the process you went through in creating this and why. What is the why behind it all? So um, I see you have fans, Leslie. So first of all, Leslie Rippon is with Seton Hall University, and she is with she joined the Master of Science in Athletic Training as a full-time faculty member in 2016. And for us, she has been our primary point of contact with the simulations that we are building with Seton Hall. And you know, to me, the big thing is finding the right use cases. You know, sometimes people want to fit a square peg in a round hole, and you know, immersive virtual reality or immersive Chrome browser experiences have to be the right situation. And Seton Hall has really found two of the best that we've ever had. So Leslie, first, tell us a little bit about your background, and then let's talk about your role in the whole simulation process.
Yeah, so I'm a full-time faculty member. I'm clinically an athletic trainer, which we are first responders, so hence the project. But I work a lot and do a lot of research in interprofessional education. So one of our goals is to develop interactive, immersive learning experiences for allied health professionals. Now we have PA, SLP, OT, AT here at Seton Hall. So we're looking to create things that are not just a one-use case, but used in multiple different professions and scenarios, because that's where we really get the most value for our work. Is to make it multi-dimensional for multiple programs. I mean, so that's one of our goals here. So I really have been doing a lot with interprofessional education and communication. So I saw a good opportunity here with virtual reality as a tool to foster interprofessional communication. And that's where this really all stemmed from.
So am I right that Seton Hall has a program where they train, is it students or is it members of the community that might be involved in emergency response?
So right now we're training students. However, we are going to actually use this tool with our public safety here on campus. The goal of the emergency response and the framework that we use here is so that even a layperson can learn how to triage in an emergency situation. Because when an emergency situation happens, you're not really sure who you're going to have available, and people need to respond. So the more that healthcare providers and lay people can respond and speak like EMS and fire, the more seamless that transition is going to be and the more lives that are going to be saved. And like you already mentioned, the rate of natural disasters, shootings, mass casualty events are really climbing in the United States at alarming rates.
Yeah, and I suspect that this could transfer out of the United States just as easily once we sort of learn best practices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the fact that it's a synchronous experience, a multiplayer experience, rather than an asynchronous or one solo person that's being able to train. How were you able to use the capabilities of having multiple people in an experience like this at the same time to create a better training tool?
So it's all about communication. And that's really a key in healthcare, is being a good, effective, clear communicator. And most of the time a medical error is committed, it's committed because of a lack of communication or inappropriate communication. So we really focus a lot on training communication, and that doesn't happen in isolation. And you need to be able to communicate with multiple different stakeholders, multiple different professions. So we really see a huge opportunity here for the fact that it's synchronous multiplayer, because it forces the students and the players to communicate. They really need to organize themselves, assign roles and responsibilities. They need to figure out how they're going to respond. They need to communicate information to one another. And so far, utilizing this, and right now we've been utilizing it with certified professionals. And it's really interesting watching their communication evolve as they go through. When they first start, their communication is very hesitant, very tentative. But as they work through the simulation, by the time they get to the 10th victim, they're really communicating much better with each other. And I think that's one of the pearls of this, is that the fact that it is synchronous multiplayer, it forces you to communicate with other people. And that's something that's going to save lives.
Yeah, what's interesting to me is that, essentially, and you would know this better than I, but every county in the United States has an emergency team that has to be trained and prepared. And my guess is that most of those people never really expect that this will happen in their community, because, maybe they've lived there for 50 years or 30 years and nothing like this has occurred. And so the fact that you can deploy with 10 or 20 headsets, how many players can be in the simulation at one time?
So up to 30 are programmed. It can accept up to 30 in the simulation at once. However, there's only 10 victims. So ideally you want under 10, because for a mass casualty incident, it's defined as when the number of victims exceeds the number of responders.
Oh.
So right now we're typically deploying teams of 4 or 5 into the simulation at a time. But you can also use it as a reflective learning tool. And this is one of the great things about immersive learning environments, is that you can do something in a environment, have other people watching, and then reflecting on the performance that they've just seen. So you can seek peer-to-peer feedback. You can give instructor to student feedback. And that's really where the education takes place, is in that reflective learning and that debriefing and that feedback. So it's a nice tool to be able to use that way.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So beyond communicating, and I get the whole communication piece, because if it were an asynchronous, a single player learning experience, then it would be very difficult to simulate communication well. And so in here, you've created this experience that has communication. But what are some of the other things that emergency responders are expected or asked to do inside the simulation?
So you need to learn the 32 can do start triage method. And it's the way EMS and fire respond. And it's a pretty nationally used coding system for prioritizing victims. Who needs to be transported and in what order do they need to be transported. So you're really prioritizing patients, and it teaches you the skills of being able to triage first before offering treatment. Here's the thing. If I start sending victims to the hospital, I have somebody in front of me and maybe they have a fracture or a dislocation, and I send them to the hospital. But now my next victim is unconscious, unresponsive, and needs to be transported sooner. But I just sent my ambulance. I'm in trouble. Now I have no resources for the higher priority patient. So it really teaches the user also how to prioritize the patients and make sure you look at all the patients first before you then decide who needs to go in what order. You know, who needs to be sent first, who can be delayed, and who can be treated on site. It does have a single player option, which is a nice feature for you to be able to learn and practice the 32 can do start triage method. So if you wanted to use it in single player mode, that's going to be the biggest thing that you get out of it, is how to triage patients and learn how to apply the correct color tag. So it does have a benefit in single player mode, but you do lose that communication piece.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I don't want to use all the time asking my own question, so I'm going to ask one more. But at this point, I'm also going to encourage, if there's someone on the call here who has a specific question, feel free to put it in chat, or I think you can raise your hand and Cassie can unmute you. So go ahead and start thinking if you do have a specific question. Here's my next question. What do you think? And I know we're still learning, right? We're still figuring out best practices, but what do you conceive are the best ways to, like, if I am in rural Iowa, which I do live in Iowa, if I am in rural Iowa, in bluegrass Iowa, and we want to train a group of emergency responders, what are the best practices? Do you bring them all into one place? Do you have the headsets set up? Have you thought through that much?
So we've started using this where we have had everybody together in the same room with the headsets, and there's a significant echo that's really annoying to everybody in the room. So I see this as being better deployed where you're using it as an adjunct to what you're currently teaching. So they're doing their training in the simulation remotely or in separate areas. And I say that just because I noticed that feedback from, because you hear it in the headset, but you can't turn the volume down because you need to hear the other interactions in there. And then you're hearing the echo, and that is distracting. They do seem to, get used to it after a while, but it is a distraction. So I do see this as better as a remote option for training. But it really does create like a low stakes environment to practice a skill, right? So typically we used to do what we call a disaster day, and usually all training squads do this. They bring in everybody, they set up a fake disaster, they simulate multiple victims. Now, the amount of resources that this takes to do and to pull off is extensive. So you can't do it that often. So usually you have only one a year, right? So for somebody in a remote location, this gives them the option to repeatedly practice in a low stakes environment, and then potentially make that one time a year where they can bring everybody together and do a full scale disaster day a little bit more impactful, because they have developed and refined their skills through repeated practice. And that's just my speculation. I'm not sure yet for what the translation to clinical practice is. We haven't gotten there. We're still testing out the system.
Yeah, and that echo thing you talk about, there's a number of ways to deal with that. But frankly, the best way is to have people in different rooms if you have enough rooms, or to have them pick up their headset and to connect remotely on their own Wi-Fi. So, or the third option that we've sometimes done, but will not work in this case, is just to turn down the volume so you hear each other in the room, but you don't hear each other through the headset. So, yeah, we completely understand that issue. So I don't see anybody with their hand up, and so we have about 10 minutes left. Am I missing anyone, Cassie? Because I'm going to keep asking questions unless someone raises their hand.
Nicholas just raised his hand.
Okay, well, we will recognize Nicholas. Nicholas, you have the floor.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Nicholas Thorpe, the Director for Emergency Management in Franklin County, North Carolina. I guess my question is, I'm interested in the idea of what you guys are moving towards in the virtual reality space and mass casualty. Are you looking at other aspects of mass casualty from hospital environment, or conducting like press conferences and stuff like that? Other situations that I think lend to this type of environment or training environment in connection to this specific scenario?
That's really interesting. I'm going to take the press conference one and let Leslie take the hospital or whatever other things she has in her head. But what we would do on the press conference version is I think that could be done not in VR, but it could be done through a 2D screen with AI journalists asking questions. And then the transcript gets recorded, and the whole experience gets recorded, and then training can occur from that. And I'd be curious what your thoughts are on that. But before we do that, I'm going to go to Leslie and ask her about her thoughts on if she's contemplating other scenarios.
Yeah, so for us, I think where I see a potential avenue for further development is that handoff. So that handoff to EMS, or EMS handing off in the hospital. So for here, once all victims are sent to their appropriate destination, the simulation ends, right? So there would have to either be an additional simulation where now you work on handoff in the hospital, or you'd have to transition now from another room, and your second room would be now EMS handing off to hospital. And I think that is an area definitely for improvement.
Yeah, that's a good idea. If this gains traction, that would be sort of the second version of the movie. So the Empire Strikes Back, the hospital strikes back, maybe. Okay. Cassie, I see you have, it's interesting. Cassie works for Victory XR, but her husband also is in this field. So Cassie.
Yeah, I actually just wanted to weigh in on press conferences. I actually had a meeting with one of our other partners recently, Steve, and they are actually utilizing our crime scene area for a press conference practice for their journalism students. So the journalism students will actually meet with the crime scene investigation students and kind of role play that situation. And then they'll write their stories. And afterwards, the journalism students will be invited into the crime scene to see what they got right, what they got wrong, and what questions they should have asked instead.
That's interesting. Yeah, there's so much potential with AI in these situations. Or not with AI. I suspect with our crime scene, they're not even using AI. So Nicholas, was that did that answer your question, or do you want to ask a clarifying question?
No, I think that's great. I think the possibilities with this is endless, for just depending on time and development. But just finding new and innovative ways on an individual level or in a group setting to facilitate these types of exercises, will take a lot of the planning and burden off of, people like me, who it takes us a year to put together a mass casualty exercise. If it's high quality and as simple as putting a headset on somebody in in our EOC or in a training room, I think there's a lot of potential benefit there to getting more people through training or more opportunities to find gaps in plans.
Yeah, that's the funny. It transfers the work from not all of the work, but a portion of the work from you to your IT person, and getting the headset set up and getting people into the headsets, making sure they know how to use the hand tools. All of that is the way to make it work, and generally IT guys like these types of challenges. So. Any other questions? I don't want to. Bertrand, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Steve. It's good to see you again.
Yes.
So my question is, going into the training modules, do you have different scenarios that you guys are planning to use, or is it a strictly one set right now that you guys are working off of? One of the things I've started to do is work with the community emergency response teams in our area, and here in the Houston area, we just got through with flooding and we've had tornadoes in our area. So we've had a mixed bag of natural disasters come through. So seeing different scenarios, I think would be a good idea if you guys didn't have that planned already.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Leslie, what are your thoughts?
So it's funny that you bring that up because I actually have a list of things next to me that was going to be my next email to Melissa and John on areas for development and improvement. And I think having, being able to select different scenes and different patients. So right now there's 10 patients, those patients stay the same. Right? So, and for repeated practice, those patients, eventually are going to need to change or to be able to be swapped out and to have a little bit more flexibility in the environments. So I think you're right with that point because learning, we know, is context specific, right? There's this to fully have readiness, right? Learning truly takes place in a context because your brain reverts back to that context when you're in the situation. And I think what's so impactful about this is, and what I see is when the students are on the scene and the smoke is coming from the car and they hear the ambulance, they get a feeling and they feel it, and the learning becomes emotional. And that's where you really see the most growth and the most retention of knowledge is when there's an emotional attachment to the context, and these environments really create that emotional attachment. So having the different scenarios would create different contexts and different emotional responses, and in a sense create many different learning environments. So I think that really is key going forward to have that.
Thank you, Bertrand. We're going to wrap it up today by giving Leslie the last word, and you can say whatever you want, but I would ask this. If somebody was interested in emergency management training, how would you balance this online tool, this VR tool versus real world training?
So I don't think that virtual training should ever fully replace real world training. I see it as another tool in your toolbox and another adjunct because it has the ability to create these immersive environments that use multiple senses. I think it creates really impactful learning environments that are also low stakes. It's not real. They know it's not real. And so when we see students in these environments, they are more apt to take chances. They're more likely to immerse because they know it's not real and they can try something and see what happens. Because ultimately, if they get it wrong, it's okay because it's not real and they can learn from that. So I see it as a great flipped learning resource material. The students go, they practice, they learn, we come back, we discuss, we debrief, and we reflect. And that's really where I see its greatest potential. I think there's always going to be, it's never going to fully replace in-seat or in-person education, but I see it as a fantastic adjunct to really enhance active learning and reflective learning practices.
That's awesome. Well, we'll end on this note. We, as I hope you understand, Leslie, we have very much appreciated the partnership and the guidance and just everything that you and Seton Hall have brought to the table. I think it's going to make a massive difference in learning in the world. And so thank you for that. And we look forward to future projects with you. And to anyone who may be on the call that's interested in this, just reach out to John at victoryxr.com or info@victoryxr.com, and we will make sure you get a demo and we can give you access to it for a period of time, and we'll walk you through it. So with that, thank you, Leslie. Thank you.